Resuming work on that 65 Super Reverb. A lot of changes done last night after I stopped filming the previous video. Some changes already this morning, about to make a few more. There are two solder joints to chassis that I don't fully trust. One because I disturbed it and did not redo it entirely, and one because it didn't look great from the factory. Let's start with the one I disturbed. That's much better. And now to this one here, right beneath the input jacks for the vibrato channel. I just got a big glob here, and I want to move that out of the way and make sure that the wire is making full contact with the brass. I don't think that's a problem, but I want to be sure. As I've shown in a lot of Fender videos over the years, these wires going from the main board to the brass control strip, sometimes they pull out just because the board flexes over the years and just pulls out of the solder. And since I couldn't really see this one because I had that big glob, I wasn't sure what was happening beneath it. I wanted to be sure. Now I can be sure. Now I moved all these wires out of the way to get there, obviously, but I also cleaned these sections of wire pretty thoroughly with isopropyl because I had some DC on the input and I had some DC on the wiper of the volume pot, and cleaning those wires with isopropyl seems to have gotten rid of that. We'll confirm that in just a moment. Let's put these back in place. So that's nice. Now here you can see I've got these two wires joined together, and the switch has mysteriously disappeared from the amp. This is a single pole, single throw switch in these, and it has two connections. On this connection, there's a little bit of a metal that kind of wraps around and holds this in place. On this one, though, that little wraparound bit of metal has broken. And so if I hold it in place like this, the switch operates correctly. But if you're just letting it be how it is, it just moves where it wants to go, and then you can't use the switch, it blocks it. So I have a switchcraft replacement switch coming for this. Until then, the bright cap is out of the circuit, and these two wires are just tack soldered together, so we will have signal on this channel for further testing. When measuring this part of the board last night for leaking DC, I had none at these eyelets after that deep cleaning. But I did have voltage on this yellow wire. On the cloth itself, it had about 400 to 500 millivolts, and that was bleeding over onto the blue wire. And what happens with this cloth-covered wire over time is it absorbs contaminants. Say it's in a humid area, there's dust in the air. All that stuff over time, and I'm talking decades here, soaks into the cloth, and the cloth becomes conductive and then isn't insulating. So I undid it here from this eyelet and unwound it back, and undid it here from this eyelet and unwound it back, and had them up in the air, and I soaked them in isopropyl and let them dry out thoroughly. And in a few minutes, I'm going to power it on for the first time and see if that voltage is gone. Based on past experience, it should be gone or greatly diminished. Fingers crossed on that. Speaking of such things, this is the wire that's going from the board to the standby switch on one side. It starts off yellow, and now I thought it was red at first. It's all discolored brown. I suspect that's from a liquid spill way back in the day. Possible from heat, but I think it's just from a liquid spill. The other wire going to the other side of the standby switch is still yellow. Now the switch itself was bad. I confirmed that because it was popping. And by which I mean that you would take it out of standby and it would pop, but then it would pop 2 to 4 more times. One pop when you initially switch it out of standby is not that unusual, but pop, 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 that's a problem. And I changed out the standby switch for a new Carling, and that problem went away. But I want to make sure that this installation is ready for prime time. So we're going to clean this together real fast. I want to use quite a bit of isopropyl for it, but I don't want all the rest of the isopropyl to go everywhere. So I'm going to do this paper towel. Hopefully it won't blind you. Let me turn down the ISO just in case. And in a perfect world, I would pull the board up and remove this wire fully and do this all outside of the amp. But I'm trying to keep some eye towards the client's costs. Look at that dirt that came off right there just for that one. Tasty. So I'm going to do some more. I really want this cloth to be very, very wet and the isopropyl to really get into the fibers. Well, I've now got it to the point where no more stuff is coming off onto the paper towel. So I think that's as good as it's going to get, is now going to a tan rather than a dark brown. I'll let that air dry before I apply power. And I'll show you some of the other things that I have changed. And then through the magic of editing, we'll power this back on. Right here, the plate resistors. The ends of the resistor where that solder is were all covered in goop and had been subject to a lot of heat, and they had drifted an awful lot. So I've got some new carbon comps there, 100K, 82K, mounted equidistant between the eyelets so that this end of those resistors was not overheated. Same thing for this 1 meg resistor between this 500 picofarad and ground. The original end of the resistor is right here at this eyelet, and it had just suffered a lot of heat. Here you can see I did change out the 3 caps in the LFO. See the 68 twin video for more details on that. And the tremolo is behaving normally now. And you can see here I've temped in a 10 nanofarad ceramic disc that I had, but it wasn't quite long enough, so it's just tack soldered here and here. I've ordered a 3 kilovolt version of the same cap, along with some other stuff for this that this amp needs, like that front panel bright switch. That'll go in there permanently because I can get it down into the eyelets rather than just being tacked in. But the tremolo tick is gone. Here you can see one shiny new standby switch. It's a Carling. And here you can see one shiny new output jack, though it has the old matte nut on it. I guess if this were just built to impress, I'd use some white vinegar fumes to artificially age these and make them look old. Most importantly, they function correctly. The old one was arcing. This one was intermittent. We cannot have that on an output jack. We don't want to have arcing anywhere in an amplifier. Wouldn't you agree? And while I changed the output jack because I don't want to try to tighten the output jack, if something goes wrong, bad things happen, I was able to fix the old original input jack here on the normal channel. It's still, not perfectly straight the way it was originally. You can see how it used to look, but it is shunting to ground when nothing's plugged in, and when they put the jack in, it opens up. So you'll get to really hear the normal channel soon. All right, a little bit of cleanup work later. A few changed plate resistors just from places where things were noisy, and both channels are sounding great. Here's the normal channel. Here's the vibrato channel. So if I turn the intensity pot down, there's no more ticking. And the reverb hum is lower than it was. It's so far reduced. I've just got to play around with it and try to get it as low as possible. The driver stage wiring is very sensitive. And I had to get everything else to this point where I could not hear rushing water sounds or anything in the background before I could focus just on the reverb. So I'll do that next. I may or may not include that in the video. If it's something earth-shaking, I'll show it. If it's just something I find, I'll mention it next time I do a playing video on this, probably when we do the final playing video on this app. Unless there's anything wrong with the speakers. I don't think there is. And I've not tested the reverb tank that's original to the amp yet, but I will do that in a few. So, as always, thanks for watching.